What's up YouTube? Welcome to today's video, and today I'm going to solve one of the problems that you may have with a Venom Gyre character or any other softcore character where you are just dying a lot while mapping. Now, I was pretty much searching for the solution because I kind of still wanted to reach a level 100 without using 5-ways. Now, that will be a topic for another video because 5-ways right now are completely busted. But as I digress, Pro Genesis Amethyst Flask has pretty much granted my character immortality. It is an amazing flask that is kind of underpriced in my opinion. Or when I bought it, it was underpriced. But I think after I bought it on stream, it kind of went up in price. Because right now, if we go check out Pro Genesis, it's around 5 divines. And it's not really 5 divines because you can get a high roll on it. And when you get a high roll on Pro Genesis, it's probably around 10 divines roughly or 8 divines. And there is a pretty wide range on it. Now, in order to understand why Pro Genesis is so OP, we pretty much have to understand what exactly the flask does. So these are my character stats. So while I was doing my out and go strategy with Exarch altars, my character kept dying. And if there is any testimonial on how good this flask is, all you have to do is look at my XP. Throughout my whole entire session, I was always at 0% XP, whether I was taking too much damage from the Exarch altars that have like too much damage scaling, especially the ones that affect the boss. I was pretty much getting one shot a lot of times, and when you get one shot, you want to find a way to mitigate that max hit you're potentially taking. So biggest testimonial ever, right? So if you ever seen stuff like as seen on TV, right here you can see my XP. I actually have 48% XP after I bought the flask. I never even died once in mapping, and it has been a complete revelation, and I have made some changes to this character. So, Brass Dome on Pro Genesis, but I did get the Pro Genesis afterwards, and it has actually completely changed my life while mapping. So, one of the reasons why it's helped so much also is a lot of times your character has low chaos resistance, especially if you're playing Omniscience. Omniscience only grants you elemental resistances, and if you want to use a synthesized ring like this one here, when you gain Onslaught for 4 seconds on hit, you'll notice that you can't really get the Amethyst ring, and you have to sacrifice either Dex, In, or Strength, which is a lot of Omniscience in order to get Chaos Resistance. So the best way sometimes is just to use the Flask. And this Flask kind of solved a lot of issues because as you can see here, I actually had negative 24% Chaos Resistance, which is pretty much a sure way to die whenever you run into any Chaos damage. So this is a Flask over here. The Flask was designed by Ben as a reward for a 3.18 boss kill event. I actually think it drops off of Uber Maven. It kind of fits the Maven theme where if you run into the beams, you don't really regenerate anything. And it is an Amethyst Flask base for Chaos Resistance, so you do get 35% Chaos Resistance when you press the Flask. And since it is a Flask, this also scales with Flask effects. So if you do decide to get nodes down over here by the tree, here you get 10% Flask effect, and the Flask Mastery also gives you 10% increased effect. And just to note, that Flask effect scales the 20% to 25% of life loss, so you have 25% times 1.2. And the same for Oriaf's End. If you have the 25% Flask effect, the chance to explode becomes higher with 27% times 1.2. So Flask Effect is a pretty good stat if you can get it for free. You can also get a little bit of Flask Effect from Alchemist Genius, from Spiked Concoction, and I think that's another 10%. So you can potentially increase that 25% life loss from damage, take it over 4 seconds to a lot higher. Now this only works with life loss. A lot of people don't really read it fully, but this does not work with energy shield loss. So if you have a lot of energy shield, or if you have a lot of ward, like ward loop people, then this Flask will actually not affect it, the 25%. So the Flask also has a pretty wide range on the roll, so this allows you for having near 100% uptime while mapping if you get one with a pretty high range. So as you can see here, 10 to 20% reduced charges per use. This one's probably not too important. And then the next one, you have negative 35 to 35% reduced duration. So when it's negative 35, it basically goes all the way up to 35% increased duration. So you can have 8.78 seconds. So if you look at my Flask here, it has 8.1 seconds because I have a 5% increased duration one. But overall, the Flask is pretty much going to be up 100% while mapping. Now, the downside of this Flask can be completely offset with recoup if you have any sort of recoup damage. Then 25% of life loss taken for damage taken over time over 4 seconds instead. And this life loss can be offset if you get recoup. And on a build with crazy leech and life recovery or life gain on hit recovery or using life flask, you will pretty much not notice the life loss at all. So on Venom Gyre, for instance, all of the life gain you have will cancel out any of the life loss over time you might be experiencing from Progenesis. Now here comes the $1 million question, and this is quite a question because if this actually worked the way that a lot of content creators posited that it would work at the start and that it would stack additively because it uses the same wording. So right here it says when taking damage from hits, 40% of life loss below half-life is prevented, and 100 to 81% of life loss prevented is lost over 4 seconds. So this is the same law. Same thing over here. Damage taken occurs over 4 seconds instead. However, this thing works multiplicatively. Now, if it did stack additively, this would lead to immortality if you got hit. Because if you scaled it with Flask effect and you use Petrified Blood, you would pretty much be able to get near 100% of your damage of life loss is taken over 4 seconds. And this would actually just be completely overpowered. However, it only stacks multiplicatively, and the way that it stacks multiplicatively is that Progenesis works first. So there's someone here who did a lot of research on this. I think he was writing a PhD thesis. However, go check him out, Sergeant Minor. I will link the video in the description down below. It is really in-depth if you want to go into the nitty-gritty like science aspect of PoE. But the way it works is so you take 700 damage, so Progenesis works first. So 25% of that is life loss prevented, and then the life loss is taken over time. Now then, from that 75% damage taken, so you have 525 life loss remaining, and then the Petrified Blood, the 40% works on that, and then this is life loss up front. So then this is also loss over time. So the way it works is that it does work, but it doesn't work additively to the point that it becomes completely overpowered, and that your character actually is effectively immune to hits as long as you have enough recoup. Now, you might be wondering, this Flask is amazing. What are the actual downsides of the Flask? And the main downside of the Flask is that it is an Amethyst Flask. So even though a lot of these Flasks are overpowered, or not overpowered, but extremely strong, like Oriaph's End and Progenesis, one of its main downsides is that these Flasks don't actually provide any major benefit if your character is capped on resistances, elemental resistances, or chaos resistances. So if you are at max chaos res, the Progenesis Flask effect of the utility Flask does not really accomplish anything. Now, you might not also have the best uptime on boss fights, so if you're using this for boss fights, don't expect this Flask to bring you like amazing tankiness unless you have some way of gaining flash charges back, whether it's by being a Pathfinder or taking nodes on the tree that lets you, regenerate utility flasks over time. So nodes like this include like right here. So utility flask gain 1 charge every 3 seconds, and they're not really that common on the tree. So there's one over here, and I'm not really sure if there's any other utility flask one. But basically, you're not going to have 100% uptime like you would like you have in maps. And another thing is this Flask doesn't work on damage over time. So the way that it works is that it says when hit during effect, and damage over time does not count as you getting hit. However, it does have enough damage to trigger cast when damage taken. So it does not make it so that your cast when damage taken won't work, because the cast when damage taken will still apply first. Now, since the thing is damage taken over 4 seconds, it does not get counted as damage over time. So even though the damage is taken over 4 seconds, it is not considered damage over time, which is really interesting wording. So the main thing about this is you can't really mitigate it by mitigating your damage over time. So you can't use Leafy Shade, you can't use the Pantheon, you can't use the Fortify Mastery, or the damage over time masteries that make it so you take less damage over time. So you cannot mitigate it in that sense. Now, this Flask is extremely interesting, not only because it has granted me finally some XP without going into 5 ways. These new unique Flasks, in my opinion, have created an interesting endgame alternative to Mage Blood, at least while mapping. I think nowadays in mapping, there are enough mobs, and if you choose a good layout map, like I'm doing Strand and Crimson Temple, your Flask uptime is probably going to be close to nearly 100% uptime. So for mapping, for instance, your utility flask will always be 100% uptime, and a lot of times these utility flasks, the unique ones, are going to probably be stronger than the effects that Mageblood can offer, or at worst, it offers you different effects that Mageblood utility flask cannot really offer. So you will never be able to get explode on a Mageblood. You'll never be able to get more projectiles on a Mageblood. You'll never be able to get that amount of damage reduction for that single hit from the Mageblood. Or you might be if you're able to use like some Ruby or Granite Flasks. And you'll never be able to get like the damage from Bottle Faith if you don't have the 100% crit time. So overall, this does present an interesting alternative, at least for mapping, for using like a Stygian or using a implicit synthesis belt like this one. And it does open up gearing a little bit more for late game, especially now that Headhunter is a lot worse than before. And it does really help out against the one hits. I do think that most people will be surprised to learn that a lot of times they do just straightly get one-shotted, especially if you take a lot of the Eldritch Altars that have like the map boss does like gain 150% of damage as extra fire damage and then penetrate your resistances. And one last note is you can buy these flasks a lot cheaper if you buy the minimum roll. So for instance, if you look at these flasks over here, 4.8 divines, and you could technically try to roll it, because 4.8 divines, if you go to see like 5.5, you still haven't seen one that's at 0%. And the expected value of you dividing this flask is probably around 0%. So sometimes it might be better if you're feeling lucky to buy the cheapest one and just spend one divine on it and see where it takes you. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors, divines, and Magebloods than me, and maybe Progenesises than me. And see you next time. Bye.